Hey guys, Shane Watson from silverladder.com here. It's been a long time since I've made a video, and I've been intending for a while to start making them more consistently. I feel like I have something to say, and I feel like I have quite a few stories. It's been an interesting life, to say the least. Today is February 11th, so obviously yesterday was February 10th. February 10th is the anniversary of my sentencing date. Now, if you've known me for a while, you probably know that I am in long-term recovery from drug and alcohol issues. And back in 2011, I made a series of very regrettable decisions, made a lot of very poor decisions, made bad choices, just bad choices, and turned my life and unfortunately other people's lives into absolute chaos. So I found myself in 2012, early 2012, facing some very serious legal charges. And as my sentencing date approached, my sentencing date being February 10th, I had a series of interviews, primarily with people from the Maricopa County Adult Probation Department. And they do what's called a probation pre-sentence report. It's a report where they gather information and they give it to the judge and they make their recommendation on what they think your sentencing should be, based on the seriousness of your crime, whether or not you have any priors, whether or not you're contrite about the choices that you made. They take input from other people, letters that people write, and then of course they let people speak at your sentencing, your actual sentencing date. But the main part of this probation pre-sentence report comes from an interview that they do with you, where they ask you a series of questions to determine whether you're mentally healthy, whether or not you feel you did anything wrong, and things like that. So anyway, today's story is about one particular item from that pre-sentence report, which I own a copy of. It's interesting reading. One item from that report that really stands out to me. But before I mention what that item is, I'll tell you this, an interesting note from the day that they interviewed me. The individual who interviewed me, and I'll refrain from using her name, mentioned to me at the very beginning of this interview that she was doing that she didn't like her job, she was going to be retiring in a month, she was sick of it, and I remember thinking, wow, I hope you set that aside long enough, because this is my freedom that's hanging in the balance here. I made bad decisions, I deserve some kind of punishment, but in the time from the offense to this date, quite a bit of time had elapsed. I was now like 75 days clean and sober. I had really just changed things quite a bit and had committed myself to living differently than I had before. So anyway, she mentioned she was sick of her job. She was going to be retiring soon. She answered 4 personal phone calls during our interview from her husband, who was repeatedly attempting to cook something. He was calling her and asking for recipe instructions, and she's on the phone with him and she's saying to me, oh, I know he's going to burn the house down. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, wow, this is really important. I was hoping, like, maybe could you focus on this, because I want to make sure that you get accurate information out of this. Well, sure enough, when the sentencing date came and they gave us a copy of the pre-sentence report, the probation pre-sentence report, clearly she had not been paying attention, and I really feel like they missed the boat on me. As a matter of fact, when my dad saw this report the day of my sentencing, he's sitting there in the court and he reads it and he looks over at me and he says, did they meet you? Did they even talk to you? So anyway, there's a few glaring issues in here that stand out, but there's one in particular for the sake of this story that I'm going to hone in on, and this is very interesting. Now, when they assess you for risk, there's what they call different domains. There's drug abuse domain, education, residential, vocational, criminal behavior, attitude, family and social relationships, alcohol use, and mental health. And so based on your answers to certain questions, they rate you at a risk percentage for these different domains. So they're trying to determine stability, among other things. The way they determine this is they ask you a series of yes and no questions. And the answers are very black and white. The questions are very black and white. And it's very obvious. Anyone with any common sense can tell what answers they want from these questions. It just so happens, completely honestly, that my true beliefs, what I believed, happen to be the kind of answers they're going to want to hear. And I'll give you an example of these very black and white questions. One of the questions they asked me was, the police are only there to harass and intimidate me, yes or no? And I said, no, I don't think the police's sole existence is to harass and intimidate me. No. And by the way, they don't let you quantify it at all. You have to give yes or no, and you can't explain your answer at all. So another question was, if I really want something, an item, an object, a possession, but I can't afford it, but I really want it, it's okay to steal it, yes or no? And I said, no, I don't think that's okay. So these are all incredibly black and white. It's very obvious what the quote-unquote right answer is. And again, it just so happens that what I believed, my answer was, is the kind of thing that they wanted to hear. But right in the middle of this series of black and white questions is the question that says, I believe it is okay to tattoo and pierce my body. Yes or no? And I said, and I asked, this is how I found out that you can't quantify, you can't explain your answers, you can't elaborate. I said, yes, I do believe it's okay. May I explain this? And she said, no, absolutely not. It's yes or no. You can't explain why. Well, if you know me, you know that I have a couple tattoos. One of them is a memorial to a family member. The other one is a tattoo that happened after the loss of another family member, where it was like a personal reminder to me to make the most of the time that I have with the people I have. I chose them very carefully. I thought them out very carefully. They weren't things that were done flippantly. And, you know, so I'm very selective. I think tattoos are something that should be thought through, you know, because it's a pretty serious commitment. Having said that, even if somebody does make a regrettable mistake and gets a silly, ridiculous tattoo that they regret, I still believe that's their choice. And so I don't believe getting tattoos is an issue of morality or something like that. So my answer absolutely was yes. I think it's okay to tattoo and pierce my body. Well, anyway, when we got the pre-sentence report on the day of sentencing, under attitude, there is this sentence. The defendant has beliefs that are non-conforming to societal norms. One more time. The defendant has beliefs that are non-conforming to societal norms. Out of the entire interview I did, I can only think of one question that would have resulted in that in this report, and that was the tattoo and piercing question. So it's really interesting to me to think that by saying that I think it's okay to tattoo and pierce my body, and I believe it's okay for someone to do what they want to their own body. It may not always be the healthiest thing, things people do. I believe it's their choice. We have to take ownership of our own bodies and responsibility for our own actions. So it's interesting to me that was in there. It's also interesting to me some of the other results that came back, but I think those are other stories for another day. But anyway, this is an area of life that most people will never experience. Fortunately, most people will never have to take a pre-sentence interview. Most people will never have this hanging over their head. But it's interesting to read the assessment that they made of me, the categories of risk. My criminal risk was very high, with 33%, which is interesting because I had no prior convictions. But it's interesting to look back at this 4 years later, especially if you know where I am now, and to see these determinations that they made on the kind of person that I was. And again, just for the sake of this video today, this story today, we're only honing in on that one. And one last time, I find it amusing now. At the time, it had me really concerned that they had missed the boat on me, because they did. But now I can look back in amusement, and hopefully you all recognize the silliness of this. One more time, the defendant has beliefs that are non-conforming to societal norms. My name is Shane Watson from silverladder.com, and I don't conform to societal norms.